Yo.
How are we doing today?
Good. Good. I just got out of an ice bath, so I'm like, I'm in my
Ready to go?
chi mode.
I love it. I love it. Well, first, let me get some introductions out of the way and some thanks before we get into this. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and especially the Beach Cities Health District for hosting this. The Beach Cities Health District is an incredible community service-oriented provider. They have the Healthy Living services, school and youth programs, their Families Connected series, which Alex and I actually did a Family Connected series a little while ago. They offer the community so many invaluable services. So we're really indebted to them for hosting this and providing a platform this evening. We want to thank the Jimmy Miller Memorial Foundation. My name is Kevin Sousa. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and an ocean therapist. I'm also the program director of the Jimmy Miller Memorial Foundation, and they are helping put this on as well. And we work with Wounded Warrior Battalion at Camp Pendleton and provide ocean therapy and surf therapy for members of their Wounded Warrior Battalion, as I said, at Camp Pendleton, at Promise Youth in Los Angeles, the Greater Los Angeles Veterans Administration, and also for down in San Diego, we work with veterans that are working on recovery from substance use and misuse. And we provide ocean therapy for them. And then the South Bay Boardriders Club, who has really spearheaded this, Tom Horton and Doug Smith and the whole board there. This was actually the brainchild of a parent that wanted to talk about substance use and misuse because he was seeing it when his son was going through a lot of difficult issues and thought that we needed to spread a light on that. And we're going to combine that with some mental health things. And without further ado, I want to introduce our very special guest in our peer-to-peer talk. This is our first one, Alex Gray. It's so good to have you here. Former professional surfer who is now a surf pro. He surfed the waters of Southern California, and I actually had known Alex since high school when I coached against him and actually interviewed him for a magazine article. God, it's almost 15 years ago now, Alex, which is crazy. But Alex now travels the world and has worked for various surf companies and organizations and has been an incredible ambassador for the South Bay and for surfers around the world, and now is teaching and coaching and training. It's evolved into being a surf pro and training people and teaching them about surf all over the world. So Alex, we're so excited to have you here today. Thanks for being here, man.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin. Amazing introduction, and so fun that our worlds continue to collide and combine with, I think, the undertone of mental health. But I feel like you and I always have a very positive vibe and aspect around what can be a bit of a tough subject, right?
Yeah.
And I think actually what's important more so is you have two guys actually willing to talk about it. And it's something that I've been trying to do more within my personality, is shed a bit of that machismo. We'll get into it, but I think just us showing up to do this is kind of a step in the right direction for what, needs a change within all of this, everything that's going on.
Yeah, well put, Alex. I think, allowing that vulnerability isn't weakness, right, in males, right? And that it's actually a strength to be able to communicate what's going on. And I think today, a lot of the youth that I work with and what I'm seeing is, look, these are unprecedented times. We say that a lot, but 3 years of COVID, masking, not masking, being in school, learning social cues has been so challenging. Not having a prom, not having graduation, there's a lot of grief and loss around that. And life is about losing things. In fact, the more that we gain in life, the more that we actually lose. And sometimes that happens and we self-medicate. And it's affected my life personally. It's affected your life personally. And I want to kind of kick it off with this, because the substance use and misuse in our community I think we would have let kids know, and that it's about choice, right? Like you are going to be faced throughout growing up in the South Bay about whether you are going to use substances or drink a little bit. And I think being informed about like what that can do, and there are positive aspects of that, and there are some really, really dark, negative shadow parts of that. And I want to have a frank and open discussion about that. It took me to a really dark place. I know it's taken you and your family to a really dark place. But we want to celebrate life today, and kind of like what substance misuse and that disordered behavior can kind of lead to, and let you know that through this grief and loss, some really positive things have come through. I'd love for you to share your story a little bit about, if you're okay talking about your brother Chris, who had to deal with that about 18 years ago, and it's ever prevalent. But as much as you're willing to share, I'd love to hear your story around you and your brother.
Oh man, you're so eloquent with your words, Kevin. It's so easy to listen to you speak, and I understand why you're such a professional, what you do in helping people. This is nice to do. And again, thank you everyone who facilitated this. Man, 18 years, that's crazy to think about. Yeah, I guess it is 18 years. Huh, that just hit me. Every year that the number grows, it doesn't seem that far. And the timeline of grief can be very temperamental. Of like some years it's more heavy, and other years you kind of float through it. We lost my brother Chris, to a drug overdose in 2004. I was a senior in high school, 17 years old. He was 20 years old. And where a lot of my reflecting and wanting to speak about it, especially to our local community's teenagers, was because that's when I experienced, still to this day, the hardest, worst, darkest, fill in all the negative blanks that you can. But looking back then, I didn't have any tools. And I think that's the difference between then and 18 years later. I was scared. I was scared of everything, but I was really afraid of moving forward, and the fear of acceptance, meaning that when I accepted that he was gone, was that the end? Was that the final chapter? And I didn't want to lose my brother. That's easy to understand, but I didn't want to lose him spiritually, right? And understanding moving forward from him passing away, of how I was going to continue to have him a part of my life, it made me really sad. I mean, even talking about it right now, I begin to get a little bit choked up, because I think, in grief, there's typically a moment that defines your grief. But as you evolve, especially from teenager to adult, the grief changes. And I've changed a lot since then. And to be honest, like, I can actually sit here in this moment relatively calm and at ease and peace, compared to, really a couple of years ago. It took me about 10 years to find peace and like real acceptance. And that's where I find compassion for people struggling. And I find compassion, it's not just in grief anymore. I felt like that's how I related to people, but like, I find compassion in people that have lost control because of substance abuse. Of course, that was my brother's journey. I find compassion in people with anxiety, depression, insomnia, tough moments of losing their job, or we go through COVID and the kids losing what was a normal life. And you bring up prom, and like, the little things in life now mean almost everything to me. And and I'm beginning to understand my journey and my triggers. And I realize it doesn't have to be so big. And I find myself really walking through life these days, trying to simplify daily, what it is that I'm worrying about, or what it is I'm looking to achieve, to not put too much pressure on myself and overexhaust myself to a degree that isn't even, there's no capacity for it. I have a blessing and cursed personality that wants to succeed and achieve. And when it is specifically goal oriented, where I know what I want, man, it's very powerful. But when my thought process is scattered, it can be harmful. And so, in this journey for me right now, I'm kind of working on self-help. I've always enjoyed helping others. I've always been better at helping somebody else than I am myself. I'm better at giving somebody advice than I should just be giving myself. So I'm on a chapter right now where I am trying to be more selfish, actually. And I thought that coincided with ego. And we always come to this thing of like, destroy the ego. And I realized, like, we need everything in our life. We need every emotion. It's just how much time you spend in each one. And some should be given less amount of time than others. But ultimately, I've learned to not be afraid of myself, who I am, and what makes me just me, the flaws, the mistakes, moments I'm not proud of. Like, hey, I'm just at a point now of kind of reflection to like actually move forward in my grounding. And man, every day is just much easier.
You know what, Alex, it sounds like, thank you so much. There's so much that you're talking about, me being eloquent, man. I love, there's so much, the grief and loss, there's acceptance you're talking about. There's also the ambiguity of grief and loss, right? Like, I think you're never going to get over a loss like that, right? Ever, right? You're just going to you go through it, right? And there's really, there is no closure, right? And the relationship with your brother, what I'm hearing, continues to this day, right? That spiritual nature and I'm wondering, like, if you ever talk to him.
Oh yeah.
Right? And
yeah.
So what I'm saying is, like, your relationship is, even though he's not on this plane anymore, is evolving, right? In one of the worst losses you can imagine, that relationship is not over, right? And there's an ambiguity there where it's like you're sitting in this space, and I see it affecting you in other ways, and just knowing you for so long, where that deep introspection, and I hear you use the word selfish, but it's like capital S selfish, right? It's not the little s selfish. It's like, I got to stand up for myself and talk about things. And I think what the reason I wanted to open up with this is that substance use and misuse, addiction, alcoholism, it is not an individual problem. It is a relational issue within families and collective society, right? And the effect that it had on you and your family, as this evolved and devolved with you and Chris and the family, where you actually wound up losing him, the effect is so great, and the loss is so poignant, and yet you've done some really good things about it. I'd love for you to talk about, the groups that you've been starting with going to the beach, and like the grief and loss, circles you're opening up, and I think what you were talking about is putting things out in the open and actually communicating when you're in your head, as opposed to staying in that by yourself, right? Asking for help, which I think we talked about as not a form of weakness, but as strength, especially that machismo, which is the ego, right? That false sense of self, that Facebook page or that Snapchat that we put out, that we like to show the world, that is really a false sense of who we are, right?
Yeah. You just hit a bunch of great points. On your first point, with substance abuse, to go further on that, my family has genetic addiction, and I had no clue that when Chris passed away at 17, that I was more susceptible to maybe somebody else of taking something too far because of my genetic makeup. I think that's something really important that I always try to get across to kids. It was a horrible lesson for Chris to learn, and then myself, because we need to understand our own body chemistry and really understand that somebody can function. I don't ever want to call it appropriately, right? You have users who function, but somebody else picks it up and tries it for the first time, and that's it.
Yeah.
And, we've gotten into something so scary now with these fentanyl overdoses that I think what was a scattered consequence within substance abuse to, that could lead to death, it's now becoming far too consistent and getting at too young of an age. No age is a good age, but it makes me upset, mad, sad when you hear of young adolescents losing their life. And it's just so good to be talking. I spoke to a youth group, actually, I did, it's called Los Hermanos, last week. It was across the street from the house I grew up in. And it's so interesting for me. I looked at the kids, I'm like, hey, imagine being you, and then in 17 years sitting in front of you giving a speech. I was like, I never imagined this ever happening, but I'm happy to sit here and do this. I find it important now to be as open as I'm comfortable with. I'm getting more and more comfortable with like really exposing myself, but being vulnerable is scary and gnarly, and you do need to protect yourself along the way. But when you're given an opportunity in a safe space where you do know that just by sharing, you could be doing something seriously impactful with a kid that's not willing to tell you what's actually going on in his life, but is sitting there and resonating with everything you're saying, it's intense. I walk away from those things. The kids probably don't know it, but I walk away emotionally drained, because that's exhausting and it riddled with fear. And I'm basically doing this dance that nobody wants to do, but I'm like, dude, if it's not me, then who's it going to be? And I actually do feel like I owe it to one-on-one conversations or the public, because I've never been perfect. I've made my mistakes, but I got lucky to have a community that supported me along the way, a solid family, incredible parents, friends, the surf sponsors. My journey was filled with really important support. And what I did wrong, and you bring up asking for help, I never asked for help. I thought that even more so on a business aspect, that if I started asking for help, it just showed that I wasn't completely capable of, the finish line. And that's such a mistake, right?
Yeah.
My current life, I'm very happy to explain to someone that I don't know something, or that's not my area of expertise. But hey, I love to learn, and I'm more than willing to learn. Like, can you explain it to me? Rather than just think I had to, like, just be able to do it all. And it's no, you cannot, you just can't support a life like that. And that's really where my anxiety, it's just a cycle. My anxiety, depression, might as well, they just do this, it's like we classify them as two things, but mine is one and the other. They just evolve and circle and play with each other. But kind of within there is where that's where I dip too far. And yeah, we can go into that if you want.
Yeah, I think, well, I want to touch a little bit on what you said about how not talking and not like, sometimes when we hold those emotions in, right, it can lead to self-medication, right? And I think it's one thing to go out on a weekend, and also I think kids got to understand like what is expected of them when they're dealing with family, right? Like, are your parents, is it a zero tolerance, right, from your parents? Are we not allowed to experiment with drugs and alcohol? Are parents open to using or talking about drugs and alcohol in the home, and like what's expected, right? That has to be clear, because some parents are okay with kids drinking every once in a while on the weekend, or smoking cannabis. And that's a personal choice. It is illegal, right? I will say that, but what is actually going on out there? We can't turn a blind eye and say nothing in this community is happening and these kids aren't really like trying and using. But what's the difference between somebody that uses on the weekend, and what happens if a friend, right, is starting to self-medicate because they don't feel they can talk to people, and they do start having big feelings, or they're trying to belong and they get lost up in it, right? Like, the statistics show us that 10% of people that pick up are going to have a problem at some point in their life, right? So that's 1 out of 10. So if you're with a group of 15 people tomorrow, 1.5 of them, or 20 people, 2 of them at a party are going to have something where this is going to be an issue in their life. We got to learn what to do around that, right?
Yeah, and I think we need to be a little bit more open to not being so hard when it does happen.
Yep.
The blame, the judgment, the shame, the rumors, the whispers, it doesn't promote that person, young adult, adolescent, whoever we're talking about here, to then want to go get help because they feel like they need to hide, because rather than people being there to support and maybe guide them to someone like you, they're afraid of people finding out that, and that's where we got to break the stigma, because like you said, 1 out of 15, I mean, I didn't know any of these percentages, but that's small. That's a 1 out of 15. That's pretty prevalent, that it could be you, it could be me, it could be our next door neighbor. Mm-hmm. Life happens. And, that's something that we love to talk about, which is choice, and learning that in a tough moment of life, do you have the guts to face it appropriately, which is usually having to deal with emotions? Or are you looking to run from it all and mask and numb it and just zombie through it? And where I am like, don't, is more, okay, yes, there's the consequence of it affecting you for the rest of your life, taking you to a place that it's too late, right? Too late for my brother. I mean, I've done a lot of work. I'm not a professional like you, but I've been around people where you listen to their talks and they almost look at themselves and go, oh my God, how did I get here?
Yeah.
Right? It happens fast, it happens quick, and it hits hard. Drug and alcohol, like, it's real. But do we have the guts to, like, this is where growth is found. Mm-hmm. Right? We talk about growing up to be an adult is how it was put to me as a kid. Let's just talk about growth. Happens in that moment where you're stopped in your tracks. It all is hard. It sucks. Fill in the blanks of however you want to. That's when you need to actually sit and hold space and understand that it's okay and it's going to be okay. And then you kind of have to open the drawers of, well, what's the degree of severity that the problem that I'm truly in right now? Can I fix this? Okay, can I fix this? What are my tools? For me, it's surfing, movement, exercise, ice baths, phoning a friend, talking to my parents now, which I'm getting better at, writing, journaling. Those are a few of mine.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, okay, I've tried all of this. Holy crap, that didn't work. It's time to call a mentor. Who are the guys that are about 10, 20 years older than me that I can sit and go have conversations with? I have many of those friends. then it gets to the point of like, do I just call somebody who's a pro? Do I call Kevin? And that's always the scariest one, because to me, that's admitting that it's a real problem.
Right.
But knowing my personality, of course, the addiction of, I cannot self-medicate, right? I learned from my brother's death that that's me. And it scared the crap out of me. Not to say that I haven't abused alcohol before. That whole world just scares me. And it's the death of Chris. So where I beat myself up is intellectually. And I can do some really good self-sabotage with just how I put myself down, with how I talk to myself.
Right. And that's that ego voice, right? We've talked about, right? And like what we feed and what we pay attention to grows. So like, listen, social media is an incredible tool, right? And the phones that we have in our pockets are incredible tools to access information. But if we're scrolling and comparing our lives to other people, right? Like even, surfers around the world, and like I'm stuck in, like it's going to feed that negative self-talk that kind of roots into negative processes, and kind of, if I'm feeling down about myself, then it's really going to hit hard, right? And so understanding, and thank you so much for that. Like, and I love what you said about like, we're supposed to grow up, right? Growing up to me is an oxymoron, right? Like we want to kind of always want to be learning and growing, right? And understanding, and growth and change, they're uncomfortable, right? And I think the problem with the drug and alcohol abuse and misuse, and we don't want to shame anybody for it, is that it numbs that, right? When I'm doing something, or I know for me, I finally felt like a sense of belonging at a party, right? Like it was easier for me to talk to people, right? It was easier to talk to and communicate with others, because I never really learned how to do that, right? And I think asking for help and feelings were also really scary for me, right? And we can kind of delve into like what feelings are. And thank you for being so honest about, like, I don't know anybody that is an adult that hasn't at one time, that's not true, I do know some people, but has abused drugs or alcohol at some point in their lives. I think the difference is a lot of what they considered people that are typical, they'll stop, right? But people that have an issue will keep going back and like touching that flame again, Yeah. And I think, to self-medicate around that, it can be really scary because we lose control, right? And the irony is that we put a depressant into something of us when we're depressed, or an accelerant when we have anxiety, and it pulls us out of the actual present, centered and aware of the moment that we're in. And that creates a lot of issues with people around us. And I think the problem what happens is that the more we use in a very selfish way, the smaller our world gets, right? Like people don't know what to do. The friends start to disperse. You wind up isolating yourself. The opposite of sobriety, of addiction, isn't sobriety, it's being connected, right? And it's like, I think, at the end, people that are using, they make a change or they hit that bottom, they're so isolated at the end. And it's just, and I think we don't want to turn our backs on them or shame them. Like you so poignantly said, right? They're using coping skills that aren't helpful, right? And so if I have a friend, what do I do if I'd like to ask you, like, if you have a friend, like just from a layman's term, and you see them like going down a bad path, like how would you address that, Alex? Like, what would you say to them if you saw somebody using to a level that was like really self-harm? How would you address that? I'd love to hear.
Well, I think the most important thing is to do it one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
In the moment is probably not the right place to do it. You're going to get pushed back immediately. So if it needs to be the next day or it needs whatever, I think keeping it private, because this is going to be a really sensitive conversation for them. Most likely it's going to be taken very personally, and come into the conversation light, because you're going to come in with your personal beliefs and opinions that in the moment most likely are correct, to try to get them help, or at least have them see and understand why it is you're even having the talk. Clarity can be really tough, depending on the timing and if the person's even ready to listen. So have patience and know that it might not happen in one conversation. And as you negotiate, or not negotiate, as you navigate the first conversation, I would let it almost be a footprint as to how you're going to continue, because we all need chances. To just think that you're going to change somebody in one day, in one conversation, that's unfair, I think, to the person that you're approaching. A true friend is lifelong, right? And we're in it to win it for the long haul. As you begin to feel people out, there's going to be moments where like the door's going to open, and we all reserve the right to be 100% honest. Parents, number one, you deserve it more than anyone. Seriously.
Yeah. And
friends, a real friend does that. I've always enjoyed friendships that I'm pretty lighthearted, fun jokester, but I love a friend that's willing to call me out. And I'm getting better at accepting those moments and going, damn it, you're right. Because that's not always fun, but it's important. I think friendships need to be harsh at times, because it's better to come from somebody I trust and love than to have it come from the wrong person.
Yeah.
And so I find respect in my friends who are willing to be everything for me. And I will listen. I choose my friends, and there's people that maybe will bring something up that I'm not as inclined to respectfully, like, actually think about and take action on. And I have friends that they say something to me and I will 100% listen to what they're saying and walk away from it and go into a thought pattern of like, oh, okay, cool. And that's kind of, with my people-pleasing personality, I struggled because I just always wanted everyone to like me. When I walked into a room, I wanted everybody in the room to like me. And you realize that it's just impossible. You know, there's too many people in this world, and it's okay. You know, with different beliefs, opinions, you name it. Cool. I just don't want to waste my time anymore engaging in true conversations with people that it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
And I'll always hold space and time for people, but I just am in a different place now. I don't care to talk shallow. I don't want to know how, is your dog okay? How's your coffee taste? Like, I'm like, dude, how are you? And I had a conversation with a guy at ET Surf Shop today that I saw that I haven't seen since I was a kid. And we had like the coolest 10-minute conversation. And life is more fun when you're willing to like just kind of walk around a little bit deeper throughout the day.
Yep.
And I think that if you practice that throughout your life, that when you need to have a conversation with a friend or a loved one that means more than normal, it's actually easier for you to transcribe and actually, it's one thing to think about, but it can be very hard to put our thought into clear, precise words when you really care about a moment with someone.
Yeah.
And so I actually think it comes from daily practice, so that when the big moments arise, you've actually kind of been doing your walk.
Yeah.
And not too much changes.
Yeah. I mean, you nailed what we call in our business wise mind, right? We take our emotional brain, right, and our rational brain, and we combine them, and we get that sweet spot right in the middle, right? Those circles kind of overlap, that Venn diagram, and that's wise mind, where I can understand what I'm feeling and communicate it effectively and intelligently, right? Mm-hmm. And I think when you live life at depth with what you're talking about, I love everything that you said, right? Is like to come up to somebody and have compassionate honesty, and then make it about you and not what they're doing wrong, but like, man, I have a lot of concerns about, like, I miss my buddy, right? Like, I miss my friend. Like, I'm finding that I don't want to be around the behavior that I'm watching, right? Like, you're not, I don't feel connected anymore, or I'm really nervous, or I'm frustrated. You can never be made wrong for what you're experiencing and what you're feeling, right? But if I start going, you're a drunk, or you're out of control, or you're this, or you're that, then what, that defensiveness that you talked about can rear up, right? And they can be like, you don't know what you're talking about, in that posture. And I love what you said about, like, I think it was like planting seeds, right? It's like, it might not be the first take, right? But it's like, if I come at somebody lovingly and honestly, and they know, compassionately, right? I think I've heard this said before, that honesty without compassion is just brutality, right? And so if I'm really brutally honest and I hit them over the head with some honesty, that might not stick. That might get them more in a defensive posture. So I want to talk to a friend from a stance of love and compassion and understanding, and not non-judgmental, right? Is what I think you were saying.
Well, you said it, because they're going to be on the defense anyways. They most likely already themselves know that they have a problem or an issue, or aren't living their best life. And you're just poking the bear. So I think we should also be careful of, like, are we projecting our own insecurities onto somebody else? I think that's really important to stay cognizant of.
Yeah.
Along the way too.
Well,
Because
I mean,
I've just learned, I come across people, and online you get those little internet bullies. It just doesn't affect me anymore, because I've come to a place where I'm like, it's not me, it's you.
yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, dude, we had something happen in one of the chats too, with some ridiculous comments, right? And I don't know, maybe it's your stalker or my stalker, who knows? But it's like, again, I don't take it personally, because that's a projection, right? All we do all day is walk around and receive projections from people, right? It has nothing to do with me. So it really, the effect of what somebody says or doesn't say to me, it's like when I work with kids, it's almost a superpower. When anybody ever opens their mouth and talks to you, it's never about you. Never, ever, ever.
Yeah.
Even if someone were to take out a gun and shoot you, it would be about their envy, jealousy, misunderstanding, hatred, anger. It would be unfortunate, because you would be receiving that, right? But it is, you know, to amplify it, every word is a projection, right? And it's about their own fear, their own misunderstanding, or whatever, and it has nothing to do with me. So I can just take it and shed it, right? And I think as we're growing up and our egos are developing, we are so concerned about what's happening out there, what everybody's saying, where people are going. I didn't get invited to this, or I'm not a part of this, or I don't feel belonging to something. And then I can go inward and say, what's wrong with me, right? And that's a shame, right? That's a shame that isolation can start there. And I think, as we talked earlier, that's where the communication has to come in, right? Like talking to somebody about. And I love how you went through the flow chart, right? Like friends, right? My parents, I'm getting better at, right? Like family members, and then the big scary professional, right? Like there's a real problem, you know. But I don't know.
But that's okay. Look,
Yeah.
we all have problems. We just do.
Yeah.
And we need to be compassionate to ourselves, to remind ourselves that, yes, we have problems, but we're not horrible for them. And yes, we have problems, but we're not alone that we have problems. This is just called being a human. And we're going to make mistakes along the way, to ourselves and to others. I think the growing experience is, can you catch yourself doing it? Like, do you actually have the clarity that you're going into one of those moments? Stop yourself. And if you can't, do you have the guts to fix whatever it was that you didn't mean to do? And usually it's an apology. Took me a long time to understand the true value in apologies. And I actually take them, if it's a real apology, I mean, I take that pretty seriously now. And I actually think there's no expiration date to an apology.
Wow, I like that. That's fascinating. So what was hard about apologizing to people for you, or how did your involvement come? I'd love to hear that.
That's an easy one, because that's me saying that I was wrong. You know, I mean, funny, right? I can laugh at it now, but
right.
Be a young, male 20-year-old whose life is built off of competition, going through the ladders of a career, and everything was very intense. And I just lived at a really high level of athleticism, but really emotions. And it all ran too hot. And continuing to not really deal with my brother's death. Some, you throw in the unexpected injuries along the way, moments of your career ending, like it's a lot. And I never had time to sit and process, to probably flow through them appropriately to learn and grow and become better from them. I just hammered to push through, get it over with, and move on to knowing what I could do better once I got through that moment. Right. So there wasn't a what would the word be? There wasn't just a place to sit with it. I was always just punching through life.
Yeah.
And, that's where anger creeps in at times, because if you're running hot, it's impossible for anger to not creep in. And, these are moments it's hard for me to look back on, because projecting those on people when you didn't mean to, and they didn't even understand why, but me not being willing to explain to them, which would have solved everything. It's now something I'm really, really aware of. And I've learned that if I'm willing to stop for a second when I have a moment in life and explain to the person where it comes from, and it dissolves everything, because all of a sudden they can relate to me, and most likely are going to have empathy because they've gone through that themselves. And then you have your moment, and then that's actually all solved. It's actually amazing how simple it can be if you're willing to stop and just let the ego down and explain why.
Yeah. Well, and then the feeling state, right? So it's like, can I ask you some questions? Because I wanted to, if not like a little work on you on this, but I'd love to get like that anger, right? Like that, it feels like, so there's no place to put it, but continue to punch through, but we don't get a pass in our feelings. They got to go somewhere, right? So as you're shoving them down, right? It's almost like this chemical process, right? You keep shoving it down and this anger arises. And anger to me is like the top level of feeling, right? Like it's a very primitive feeling. It's very easy to access, right? And I can project it, throw it everywhere. But what was underneath that anger for you? What was underneath that?
Oh, sadness.
Yeah, right? And hurt, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was that thing of feeling weak to show sadness. My personality is very bubbly. And when I have an off day, I mean, I literally have people come to me on off days and be like, dude, what's your deal? And kind of negatively hammer me. And I'm like, dude, I'm just having a bad day. And they're like, what do you mean? You can't have a bad day. Your life's perfect, or, something like that. And I want to sit there and agree with them, because I've lived, in a sense, a charmed life, but it's just not true. And there's people that when you're a public figure, they don't allow you to be normal or human. And I always want to tell everyone, like, hey, if you're having a bad day, wear it. Because we talk about suppressing. That's when it goes into the vault and unexpectedly comes out at the wrong place, wrong time, wrong person. And it's either going to hurt relationships or a business relationship. Pick one. They both suck when it happens. Typically, the business one is harder to get back than the friend. So that's where just have the day, dude. I mean, I've been very open about this. When Chris passed away, I taught myself how to not cry. And it's real. I can count the number of times that I've cried in the last 18 years. It's typically in front of people. It actually is when it actually happens is when I've been speaking in front of kids at schools. and I'm in front of 1,000, 2,000 kids, and I start bringing my brother up, and I just like, I actually lose it. It's actually, I don't, you and I could talk about this sometime of, I wonder what that trigger is. It's probably because I'm so vulnerable in front of so many people. I feel naked up there,
Yeah.
and there's just nowhere to throw armor out. But how, I mean, look, that's something that I think is sad, because, and this is the severity of how we treat ourselves, not others, but truly how we treat ourselves. We're given the gift of emotions. They're a gift. Every single one of them is a gift that has a place. It does. The anger thing, I think, comes primordial, right? Fight or flight response. Technically, probably was used more so in protection. But we don't need to suppress ourselves. We don't need to suppress emotions. As guys, like, we deserve to let it out, because you can be a better, whatever it is you're looking for, you can be actually more solid if you're willing to just be and not fight the natural process of, I mean, overall, it's an unknown thing, right? We don't know what tomorrow is. Don't really know what tonight is. So that's where you walk around with gratitude for the natural things we've been given, and then the things that we try to control in our life, which is our dreams and goals. And yeah, I think, reputation, dignity, self, our sense of self, that's, we got to be grateful, like, every day. And when I'm having my off days now, I try to find gratitude. And if I can remember gratitude, that kind of begins to allow me to put myself back on track.
Yeah, man. So I love that. Like, finishing up with gratitude, but it's what you're describing is like your humanity, right? Like, our humanity gives us these emotions, and it's rich information. But we're told like you're told, like, what's wrong with you if you're not happy, right? And it's like, I'm just experiencing.
Yeah, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, right.
Wrong with me. You just said it. That's okay.
Yeah, and it's like, I'm Alex experiencing sadness, not a sad person, right? I'm Kevin experiencing anger, not an angry person. And I think it took me a long time to understand that and not embody that, right? Because we're told, again, as little boys and men, right? Like, what's going on with that? Like, we embody those emotions, right? We don't let them flow through us. And if I actually move towards that sadness, I've learned that it lessens, right? If I move towards the anger and go into the hurt, like, underneath all that anger is hurt and sadness. You nailed it right away, right? You felt it, right? And I think you get emotional when you're up there because you're sharing an intimate part of you, right? And it's an authentic part of you. And you are freely allowing those emotions to come through you. And again, it's one of the strongest things that we can do, Yeah.
And you know what, at the end of the day, it's actually comforting knowing that you can't please everyone.
Yeah.
A fellow therapist once told me, there are bad people in the world. And I sat for a second, like, can you just say that once more? And it's a harsh statement, but it allowed me to realize, like, there are people that they're just, see, the way that I describe a bad person now, and if I'm having a bad sense of myself, is that I'm not doing my own personal self-work. So I'm willing to bring someone else down along the way and hurt them to make myself feel better. That's how I am in defining a bad person at this point in my life, because that's unfair.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where we get into the bullying and all this stuff. Like, I have no time or compassion, respect, anything for anyone that is going through life that way. I would rather meet someone full of flaws, mistakes, problems, but wearing them on their chest and doing their best to work at it. I'm in. Those are the people that I want to spend time with.
Yeah.
Right? That to me is a super strong person. Rather than meeting somebody who looks perfect, but I don't know what's truly going on in their life, and I feel like they're masking their whole life and not willing to do the scary thing of exposing their flaws and all this stuff. I'm like, that's just not interesting to me. I've experienced too much in life that I want to know, like you, like the real you. And I don't care that you did this, and that. Like, that actually makes me feel normal. And you and I are going to probably get along because that's me too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's that authentic self, right? And connecting at a deeper level. I think that a lot of the surface stuff that we're talking about, the everyday thing, it's important because we've got to know how to have like small talk with people, right? We can't live at a depth all the time, but it is nice when you connect with somebody like I see you and you see me, and we can actually connect without the airs, those elevator speeches, right? The ego, when you meet somebody and they'll name drop. And again, I don't, I really try not to judge anybody or anything. It's a lot of work, right? Because it's like everybody's where they need to be evolutionarily, even the bullies, right? I don't want them in my life, so I try not to pay attention. They'll come into the space every once in a while, and that's totally okay, man, because the time spent on what I pay attention to grows, right? So if I'm looking at like love and abundance and joy and gratitude, like the gratitude is that big. You said something earlier about working out, meditating, gratitude, journaling, all those right brain processes, right? We live in a left brain society that's constantly trying to track what's coming up next, what's going down, containing things. Like we are wired to have routine and understand what's happening in the next couple seconds, right? So we're constantly trying to make it work out so that we know what's happening, so we're not in a position where we don't know what's going on, right? And those right brain processes kind of take that away. We don't know what's going to happen when we're surfing, right? Like we are fully in the moment and fully in a flow state, right? When we're on the wave, the ego is gone because we are just present, centered, and aware, right? Gratitude lists, journaling, meditation, those all open up those right brain processes and give the left brain a break, right? And the more we do that and connect with that, the easier it is to kind of, I think, see this soul voice, right? Like a lot of the clients that I work with and a lot of people that have problems with drugs and alcohol, they're constantly chirping it at themselves, and that the low self-esteem and the low self-talk permeates them, right? And the lies that we tell ourselves and whatever that, like, imagine having a friend inside your head. Imagine popping that voice out and having a friend next to you talking to you like that, right? Like, would you walk around with him, Alex, during the day?
Well, no. Would you say that to your friend?
Right.
You wouldn't. So why would you say that to yourself? But we do, because we're our own worst critics.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
I think the reward of the whole thing is, in full circle with what we're talking about, is if you can get to a place within yourself that you've done enough homework where you can actually help someone, right? Like, you've experienced life and you have faced yourself in the moments that when somebody comes to you with a problem or an issue, like, you can sit and confide with them. And words are powerful. People that say you're defined by your actions, like, I think that your words are very powerful. And something else I've been kind of dwelling on is it's not your actions, it's your reactions that define you. It's a much more powerful place where people actually get to know you, right? You're exposed on how you react. Right. And I've always had a temper and I can get boily, and learning to take a second, take a day to send that email, not send that email, not call, revisit a little later. It's powerful. It's, for me, the homework has allowed me to be able to find clarity in quick thought processes.
Yeah.
And then decide, is it worth it? right?
Yeah, well, what you're talking
Right,
about,
99% of the time, it's
no,
worth it.
right, and what it is, I can explain the neuroscience of this, right? Like we receive information, it hits the amygdala, right? The oldest part of us, fight, flight, or freeze, kicks up to the hippocampus, and if we're stuck in trauma or the fight, flight, or freeze, then we're going to lash out, right? Or we're going to run, or we're going to freeze. We need to get it up to the higher top-down thing, the higher regions of our brain, prefrontal cortex, and we put language to that, right? So instead of reacting, what you just really well said beautifully was we respond, right? A response versus a reaction is a whole different ballgame, right? And whether it takes, I think, pausing, right? Especially when we're agitated, right? Pausing when we receive information. We need to let it get up to those higher regions, and it can take nanoseconds, but sometimes in the beginning, especially if we come from a trauma background or if we come from issues where families that we grew up where it was really challenging, we go right to that fight or defensiveness, right? Or I got to get out of here, where it's like, hold on, is my life really threatened right now?
Yeah.
It's not, right? Is what this person's saying to me about me? No, I'm just going to respond. Hey, this is how I feel. This is what I'm experiencing, right? And we move on from there, right? Or even in the business sense, it's like, what is this person trying to say to me? Am I taking this really personally, or can I respond to this with thought, right? And in time. And I think you're right. Sometimes I'll tell my clients, write it, get it all out, right? Get it all out of you, and then sit on it, read it the next morning. And most of the time they're like, oh no, that is not what I need to say right now. Or that is not what I'm trying to say.
You know what I've been doing? There's notes on your iPhone.
Yeah.
I'll go into notes and I'll just write my freaking speech, and then I'll tailor it, because I really want it to like hit hard. And then like an hour later, I read it and I'm like, this is so dumb. Like, just delete, no response. And the next morning I wake up without anxiety, I'm relieved. I'm like, oh my God, think about what waking up today would have been like had I have hit sent on that.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool as you move through it, when you can begin to delete your foolish moments.
Right. Well, and I mean, having some clarity around that. And it's like, again, I think what happens is, as you learn this, like sometimes you'll say something and you'll have to apologize, right? Or make an amends or take it back. Sometimes you can course correct while you're saying it. And the more you practice this, the easier it gets, and the more your words will be more impeccable. They'll matter more, right? Like, and again, there's a great book called The 4 Agreements by Ruiz, right? And one of them is be impeccable with your words. And if I'm impeccable with my words outwardly, it's not just that, it's being impeccable with my words inwardly, right? How do I talk to myself, right? Am I judgmental and critical of the world around me, right? I'm an acceptance of the way things are, so I don't have to judge them, right? My ego says good, bad, and indifferent, but sometimes my worst day, right, has led to some of the biggest growth, right? And the biggest, I look back and be like, wow, I understand why that happened now. I didn't like it when it was happening, but it's brought me to this place of incredible growth and change, and made me a person that is more connective and more human, right? And I think sometimes we forget our humanity. You know what I mean, Alex?
Well, and since we keep kind of tying in substance abuse, I personally think of a lot of times that I've said things that I didn't mean to, was, being inebriated. There's some alcohol involved, and there goes the loose lips. And that's the thing about this stuff, is that once it's out, you can't take it back. And when you look at someone and say, hey, I didn't mean it, then you're going to have to kind of find a special person that understands that you didn't mean it. But, for young kids out there, a lot of foolish things happens in those moments, right?
Yeah.
You have accidents, like true physical accidents, drunk driving, moments that change someone's life forever. You have social interactions. You see a lot of people push their partners away, and once, okay, twice, 3 times, like they're gone.
Yeah.
And these are those moments where you're like, that's where you really need to sit with yourself and go like, if you're socially using whatever, like, is it appropriate? You know? And if it's not, you need to start understanding within yourself, like, well, what's appropriate for you? And keeping up with the Joneses probably isn't going to work for you.
Yeah.
And that's where I commend, because I'm not sober. I occasionally have a drink, and I've never been sober, but I've lived in that world, rightfully so, with my brother. And I just have the ultimate respect for anybody that's willing to make such an extreme decision that is so hard socially to do something for themselves to better their lives, you know, and going through sobriety, man, that is just such a beautiful thing. The programs that are out there, AA, NA, you know, but there's probably things now that I don't know about, but to be stripped of everything that you have held on to, and with no bullshit, like actually have to vulnerably like admit and then like cleanse and go through this process. And then I watch people, I'm like, oh my God, dude, it's so great to see you again. Like, you know, I love watching people like it's like, you know, reborn, not in a religious aspect, but you're watching a second coming of a person.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's a better version than their prior self, because everything that we're talking about, you in those programs, I mean, you have to. It's not a choice anymore. It's like this, it's part of it.
Right.
And I just, you know, I just think my brother tried so hard. He did. He relapsed. I'm so bad with the facts, but he relapsed. I think he relapsed twice. Got through sobriety, was at a sober living home. You know, it just, man, it ultimately, he couldn't find the clarity.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know who's on here right now. Like, I don't know if we're talking to adults or kids. It's almost two different people, because you're speaking to two different phases of life. But I always want to speak to the kids and just be like, look, take a second to understand the choice that you're making. Like, is this going to derail you from what you want in life? Right? Something I told the kids the other night is like, if you're not happy, or there's not happiness involved in the path, it's not worth it. It's not. Like, every single person in the world deserves to be happy.
Yep.
And within there, everyone deserves to know what it's like to feel cared for, loved, supported, that unconditional thing that I got so lucky with. And to be pulled away from life because of a choice, you know, like drugs and alcohol, it's avoidable. Mm-hmm. And these are the moments where it's like, as adults, we look back and go, well, when was the moment? With kids right now, it's like, hey, you're at the moment of setting up the rest of your life. Like, you can be, I was 10 years old when I rode my first wave, and it determined the rest of my life. And it's crazy, dude. How lucky am I? Who at 10 years old knows what they want to do?
Not many people, Alex, not many.
No, and God, what a freaking gift.
Right.
There's a lot of things that I'm actually dealing with now, trauma that happens at a young age of going through adult decisions at a young age of pursuing a career. But man, I was willing and able to put the effort, the work, the sacrifice, do my best to live a healthy lifestyle, because I wanted something more than anything in the world. And it took my best self, it took my healthiest self, mind and body, to perform. And that's where, like, I'm a surfer, and I'm so proud of it, because the career, the 20 years was incredible. But like, dude, now at 35, I have this tool that I'm still stupid obsessed with, that I had a moment of trying to wean a bit away from. And I realized that that's the most foolish thing that I can do, because it inspires me, it motivates me. I have a sleep schedule now because I want to get up and go and do what I love to do still. I stay healthy, fit, in shape. I try to not move into the excuses of metabolism, choose what I eat and drink. I can tell you I'm drinking way less than I ever have. And it's helped, my sleep. But I was thinking about today, my overall mood. I'm just like, I'm happier. And even seeing my body chemistry, like the inflammation, alcohol is toxic, and look, again, from somebody, I socially use it, but I'm now actually aware that it's not the best. Any substance, right? I mean, I guess it's vices. As humans, we have vices. Moderation, people who can control it, yes, but like, man, I'm doing it with myself right now, like checking in, like, do I really need this in my life? Is this making my day-to-day life better?
Yeah.
Like, and that's a pretty cool question to ask yourself at any phase of life. If something, and it can be anything, right? Substance abuse, a relationship, a habitual habit, whatever, stopping and going like, but at this phase of my life, do I need this anymore? It's pretty cool. We can always ask ourselves that.
Yeah. And and a lot of times it is a phase of life thing, right? And there's people that'll party through high school and kind of let it go after college. I on behalf of sober people, thank you. You were very kind to us.
But I want to respect it. It's so awkward to be like, I'm not sober, because that's a crazy statement too. That's awkward to say, but it's okay. I'm not. So I think there's respect from both sides always.
For sure. And I think it is, it's funny for me, I'd known for a very long time that I had an issue with drugs and alcohol. I was just terrified because of all the things you said, right? Like I was terrified to like lose my friends and lose this life. And yet I'm driving my life off of a cliff, and it's just like, I'm losing friends and people aren't hanging around with me, and it's different, strange people in strange places. And it's like, what am I doing, right? How did I get here? And then I love when I work with people and I'm like, it just wasn't me. And I'm like, no, it is you. It was me, right? And until I confronted that shadow part of me, that's when the change could occur, right? And for almost 12 years, I've created a life that's so much better and more connected, right? Like letting go of drugs and alcohol, it gave me a greater freedom than I've ever had in my entire life. And every day it just gets better and better. And, look, I don't know if what I see and what happens is the right way, but I just know it's a lot of fun, right? It's connected, right? Like there's a reason you and I are sitting here right now, and we get connected like this. We'll see each other every once in a while. You're a really good friend of mine, but we don't have to see each other every day, right? We'll pass across, we'll see at a show or at a contest or on the beach or here, and the ocean connects us in that as well, right? So what I had to do was give up that and switch it over. I've trained and completed the Catalina Classic, right? Like that was what needed to be. I needed to trade that energy that I had spent so much so in really messing with my biochemistry, and I wanted to change my body. I'd never been on a paddleboard in my entire life, and there are pictures of me on it for the first time, and I was a mess, man. And I thought I could, from surfing. But, and to complete that task and to get that little paddle, which I have up there, which we actually use at the Jimmy Miller Memorial Foundation, we use Jimmy and bring him in to our circles, talking circles, because that energy and that connection that the ocean has with all of us, and a lot of the kids that are watching right now, I really hope that like that energy, that's the good stuff in life, right? Like that's the really healthy. Our brains are wired to have good feelings, right? To serotonin dump and norepinephrine and like all these different, and drop our cortisol levels. And when we surf, it's just like we're in that moment, right? Like it's connective, and we're able to heal, right? I go to the ocean to heal. I know you do that with your grief and loss too, Alex, right?
Yeah. Well, it's so funny. You brought up three things that I want to hit on. A, the energy you put out is what you attract. B, change. And three, Jimmy Miller. I'm going to try to get it because we don't have that much time. But, you had a world that you thought was everything, but it wasn't your true calling in life. And when you decided to make a change, which we as humans can do at any time of our life, the thing is that it's scary, but if it's not scary, it isn't a true change, right? You don't actually care. So actually, we need to greet the fear in change, because that's when it's time to actually dive deep. But in everything that we're talking about, our choice of words, our lifestyles, that bleeds. And you begin to attract like-minded people who, when we're wondering, surrounding yourself with people is the correct people is so important. Your tribe, your friends, like, it's real.
Yep. And
this is one of the rewards of doing the hard work, is you begin to meet and greet and have incredible people in your life. I mean, at times where you're like, oh my God, I can't even believe so-and-so is talking to me right now. And then so-and-so is your friend. And then you and so-and-so are on a surf trip and you're like, oh, cool. All right. And that's where I'm like, I'm on the right track. If this is who's coming into my life right now, and it's been weird, okay, the weirdness, I'm going to stay weird and keep doing this. And then I always want to acknowledge Jimmy Miller. My Chris Gray and Jimmy Miller are just synonymous. And I just miss that guy still. Even bringing him up, the same with my brother, I just start getting emotional about it. But you realize the impact that people have in your life. And I was a very impressionable kid. I really took in people, like the older guys that I wanted to be. And I had good ones and I had bad ones. And Jimmy was it. He was that guy that changed my family. We met him. He took my brother surfing as his junior lifeguard instructor. He took us into his house on the weekends. That's how I started surfing. We didn't even know him. Took us on our first surf trip. It was just like, there's people you come across that are just bigger than life. And I got to have one of those people. And it's just so sad, because he deserves to be here right now. And that's the thing that I don't know if you do this with people that you've lost in your life, but what would it be like to have a conversation with them now? I'd love to have a conversation with my brother and Jimmy as a 35-year-old. Yeah. Because it would be a good one. And I think I would actually be able to sit and ask them the questions that I didn't really know what they were. Look, the whys never get answered. That within grief will hurt you. And so I've just chosen with all of these incredible people to honor them by living a life that I know that they would want me to be doing in this moment. It's not that if they were here, it's as they're here, right? And for anybody struggling with grief out there, there's choices within grief, and there's a physical end, but from that point on, it's up to us. And the more that you allow yourself to open up and accept and start asking your questions, that you need to ask yourself along the way, if that makes sense. Am I okay? Why did this trigger me today? What do I have to move through today to continue being an embodiment of why you miss the people so much, which is because you love them ultimately. And so now you have to continue on with love for yourself, because that's the most important part in loss. We have to refill our cup. Yeah. Can't live in the guilt and the coulda, woulda, shouldas. What we got is what we got. And we cherish that and we hold gratitude with that. And then we move forward and remember them positively. and find as many photos as we can, become to be comfortable with hearing songs that remind us of them. A paper you pick up accidentally out of a drawer that you didn't see, that all these little things that they used to scare me to death. But now I just, when I get these moments, I stop and I just smile and I sit with them and I digest them and ingest them. And I'm like, oh man, that was crazy, and for me at this point in my journey, like I'm actually proud of where I am now, that I can sit with unexpected surprises of the losses that I've had and look at all of them as gifts, rather than being something that was going to pull the wheels out from under me and lock me up in a house all day, sitting in a really gnarly, toxic place. And that's scary, ultimately being driven to loneliness in a closed room. Been there.
That's that isolation. And Alex, I think what happened through those great losses are Jimmy Miller Memorial Foundation came to be.
Yeah.
And has changed.
And kudos to the Miller family, like incredible, because loss will tear you apart. There's two ways that it goes. It brings a family closer together than ever, or it just rips you apart. Right. And the togetherness takes work. It just doesn't come without work and a lot of compassion within the family, and trust, right? Because learning how to move forward in honoring and saying their name, and then putting it on pen to paper and then using it to help others, that's a process. So I would love to just continually say to the Millers how proud I am of them.
And you've done the same thing. I mean, you started some circles down at the beach in Torrance, and talking about grief and opening that up, and same thing. Dude, I mean, listen, the way you have honored Chris and in your life and what you do is just, it's nothing short of tremendous, man. So I appreciate all that you're doing, and on behalf of like mental health providers, like it is necessary. There is an onslaught of grief, loss, anybody that is helping right now, because there just isn't enough. There aren't enough therapists. There isn't enough time right now, and the way that you've honored your brother to show up for that is awesome, man. Very cool.
Yeah, thanks. I'm lucky. I had an incredible person in my life, and the person was so impactful that I think about them every day, and I will the rest of my life. And it's going to continue to evolve as I evolve as a person, but I'm not afraid of it anymore. And it's a great feeling when you can welcome a really hard aspect of life. That doesn't mean there's going to be bad days. There's going to be.
Yep.
But I'm familiar with them now. And to use the word okay, it's like you never want to be okay with the loss, but like it is okay. And I'm there. And doing those groups that I did for 2 years, just locally down at the beach, I was hoping to help others. And it was, man, I get it now. Like those 2 years changed me.
Yeah.
When you take on wanting to help others and actually holding a real, true, safe space, it takes, I mean, I applaud you as a therapist, and every therapist out there. It's going to a place that you're not taught about. I mean, you are, but once you're in it, and the energy and what you experience seeing others, where you can relate to their breakdowns and seeing true pain, it'll change your life. And ultimately just knowing that I wasn't alone. And then, just because we're getting close here, but like what was so powerful was being in a group of people where unspoken, there was a bond.
Mm-hmm.
We always feel like people don't understand. Put it in any category of that people are struggling with something. Well, they don't get it. They don't understand. To remove that and be around people who do, and knowing that anything that you say is okay and that people will understand, man, I hope everybody gets the benefit of that in life, because that's like an accelerated therapy.
Yeah, no, dude, you are right. And I think, as a therapist, it's so hard because there's nothing to fix. You just have to sit in that space, right? And to collectively do that with a group of people and hold space for that, because eventually you hope it integrates into your life, and that relationship with the person that's passed evolves, right? Where it's like still talk to them, right? I still talk to people that have meant so much to me in my life, and that relationship isn't over. I actually talk to my father in a much more kinder way now than I probably ever did when he was alive, you know. And it's crazy. I have a much more deeper, meaningful relationship with him now, and it's you know, we've all been going through a lot over the last year and a half, 2 years, right?
Well, you know, you just made me laugh, and that's probably a great thing to close this on, is like, we got to remember to find humor in this entire thing, because if we take it too seriously, you can't, you know, and to remember to laugh at yourself along the way, to find humor in your own flaws, like, that's great. And to be around others that make you laugh and to have fun, I mean, talk about importance. So the balance of the entire thing, but at the end of the day, we have to make this fun.
Yeah.
Because it's life, and we're here for a short amount of time. I think we forget that. And, you know, at some point, we want to have a long-lasting footprint that helps the people after us, that makes everything a little bit easier, a little bit brighter, a little more fun. So remember that whether you are getting applauded for it or not, you're getting attaboys for it or not, when you're willing to work on yourself, you're going to at some point help someone else. And that's a beautiful, humble way to go through life.
Yeah, man. I think that's a perfect way to end it. Gratitude and joy and laughter and connection, right? And like that's what this is all about. Man, it has been great connecting with you and having this conversation. I want to thank Beach Cities Health District and Tessa, who has been awesome helping us run. We didn't get to many of the questions. We'll maybe do that next time. We're going to have another peer-to-peer talk on April 28th, I believe, and that's going to be with Dane and Bruna Zahn. Yeah. They're really excited to come and talk more mental health. Both professional surfers and wonderful human beings. Tessa, thank you so much. Thank you to Beach Cities Health District. Thank you to the South Bay Boardriders Club. Make sure you go to their websites and look at their contests that are coming up. And you in town for a little bit, or what's going on with Alex before we say goodbye?
Man, I leave for 4 months on April 5th with surf coaching and a bunch of amazing travels with some incredible people. So I'm home, and I've just been really kind of cherishing every day, knowing I'm going to be gone for quite a long time, and been trying to get in my ice bath as much as possible.
Well, man, soak it up. Enjoy being home. I hope to see you on the beach when you get back, hopefully down, and maybe we'll see you at Jimmy Miller Memorial Foundation, one of our things. We'd love to have you down there. So
and wait, but before we go, Kevin, we want to thank you. You're always the host, and you have always been kind. Every time I see you speak to someone, you will compliment them. And you're so important to have on this talk because you're a success. And I hope that every day you're reminded that you're important and what you've done means more than you know. Thank you. I love this community. I always will. And I feel like there's people like you that are going to make sure it's going to be okay along the way. So thanks for being the security for the mental dojo of the South Bay.
Oh, dude, thank you. I appreciate that. I love this community too. It's given so much to me so freely. And yeah, man, until next time, hopefully let's do this again soon. Maybe live and in person.
Live and direct.
All right. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Beach Cities Health District. Thank you, Jimmy Miller Memorial Foundation. Thank you, South Bay Boardriders, and all the people behind the scenes that help put this on. So everybody take care and have a great day.